Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Theo, and I love to talk about horror movies. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about The Substance. The Substance, man, it's a controversial film this year, isn't it? Well, last year, 2024. We're in 2025 now, believe it or not. But it's a very controversial film, and I guess I understand why, but to some degree I'm failing to understand why as well. Just very similar like with Terrifier 3, I didn't understand why it was so controversial. For The Substance, it's more controversial in ways that have to do with body horror, as to where like Terrifier 3 was more controversial for a lot of different reasons. So The Substance is a body horror directed by Coralie Fargeat, and I hope I'm saying that right. I don't know, it's a weird pronunciation. But I think that this movie is very good. I think it's good in a lot of ways. There are a lot of different tactics that were used in this video that kind of go above and beyond to show you what it's like in Hollywood to experience the shame of getting older through your career. So let's get into the plot of The Substance, and then just FYI, toward the end of this video, there is going to be some spoilers, so I will tell you when, but at the end of this video, I will let you know whenever the spoilers are coming, so if you want to stop the video there and experience it for yourself, 100% understandable. Now, essentially, the movie just revolves around a few characters, and that's okay, and you can do that in some cases, and it works really well. And it really works well in The Substance. So the movie really focuses around Elizabeth Sparkle. She is a 50-year-old actress who used to do fitness videos and different modeling. And throughout Hollywood, as her career is going on and on and on, her agent and her directors and things like that are basically telling her that she's getting too old to be in Hollywood. That's where the center plot point kind of vocalizes in this movie. So on Elizabeth Sparkle's 50th birthday, she basically gets a low blow and gets fired from the company that she works for in Hollywood. And by doing so, it kind of sets her on this spiral of, am I good enough? Why did this happen? Why are they doing this to me? And then she gets a random invitation from a laboratory to go and partake in an experiment called The Substance. And I think that this is a good vocalization, especially in our day and era with, YouTube and TikTok and social media and the uprising of Hollywood and how everyone wants to be famous. Everyone wants their 15 minutes, And this movie does a really good job at showing you the lengths of what a person would go to achieve those and stay young and stay beautiful, to make themselves look like people want them to look, versus like how they feel in their own skin. But I'm ranting a little bit here, so let's get back onto the subject I was talking about a couple minutes ago. So Elizabeth Sparkle basically gets a random package saying that she's welcome to participate in The Substance. And she does, and what The Substance is it is a 7 day on, 7 day off type of program, to where you basically switch out with a better version of yourself that is birthed from you. And there's a lot of really great things, practical effect wise, that go into making this movie fantastic. The elements of what happened when the substance takes place is really, really good. I give this movie like a full-blown, like for 2024, practical effect wise, it's like between this and like Alien Romulus, without a fucking doubt. And this movie is not for everybody. It is kind of controversial if you're afraid of like body horror or like needles or body shame, anything like that. This movie is probably not going to be for you. I will go out on a limb and say that right now. It is a full-blown just body experience from nearly the start to the very end of this movie. And it kept me guessing, because I heard a lot about this movie online, and I kept thinking like, okay, this is going to be what everyone's talking about. This is the controversial thing everyone's talking about. And then it would go forward about a half hour, and I'd be like, oh, well, that's probably what everyone's talking about online. And then it would go a little bit further, and I'd be like, oh, holy shit, that's definitely what everyone's talking about online. Now, this is the point in the video where I start getting into a little bit of spoiler. So if that's not for you, I get it, but if you want to experience the rest of the review, stick around. but there are going to be some things talked about from this point on that may ruin the movie for you if you don't want to experience it for yourself. So whenever Sue comes to fruition, she is born through the spine of Demi Moore's character Elizabeth. And whenever she is born, that is very prominently told to them that they need to be back and forth 7 days on, 7 days off, and you have to switch on time and you coexist between each other. Whatever one does, the other one has to coexist with. So after the first week of Sue being born, she basically goes out on a drunken party, comes back, and she wants an extra day. So in order to get that extra day, she takes more fluid, which I'm assuming is spinal fluid, from Demi Moore's character, and extends her day by one, or extends her week by 1 day. And by doing so, she inevitably harms Elizabeth in the process. And what I mean by harming Elizabeth is whenever Elizabeth wakes up after her 8th day of being in slumber now, she wakes up and her finger is decaying. Her finger is decaying and it's becoming more disintegrated because Sue took an extra day and extended the 7-day process. And for me, that's whenever I started realizing at this point in the movie, like, this is going to be the driving factor that kind of separates these two characters. And it did. It 100% did. Because as the movie goes on, you get that feeling like Sue's going to keep doing this. This is obviously what she's going to keep doing. It's going to continue to harm Elizabeth, and eventually it's going to end badly for one of the two. And boy, it couldn't get any worse for both of them. Because as Sue goes through this movie and she gets bigger and better in Hollywood and starts to experience that fame and that fortune, that spotlight, the attention that Hollywood seems to take control of people over. And I think that has a lot to do with this movie too, is how Hollywood can take control of somebody based off of looks and propaganda. I think that's a big driving factor for the ending of this movie. But we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. But as Sue continues on in her journey in Hollywood, she gets news that she's going to be hosting the New Year's Eve party. And as she finds out that she's going to be hosting the New Year's Eve party, throughout that process, as they switch back and forth, basically Elizabeth's starting to realize what Sue is doing to her because of her finger being disintegrated in the time before. And the two start to basically battle each other for who's going to stay alive and who's going to die. And basically Sue gets the upper hand and starts a 3-month process of taking spinal fluid out of Elizabeth's back and putting it in jars so she can extend her process for an extended 3-month time period to get to New Year's Eve. And I love the process of which this was shot. I love all the cinematography in this movie. It was a little bit artistic for me, but a lot of the driving factors in the way this was shot is really well done. It's artistically shot. There's a lot of dark and eerie scenes. There's a lot of like fish egg camera scenes whenever there's people that are pretty much obscene people that are getting the best of these characters, like their bosses, directors, agents, things like that. There's like a fishbowl effect around those people. There's really good cinematography and lighting based into all this movie. But I love the way it was shot whenever Elizabeth is down for 3 months, because you don't see her during that 3-month time period. And it makes you start to think, like, what the hell is she going to look like whenever she comes back to life, or if she comes back to life? And man, it was an experience. So at the end of the 3-month time period, we're rounding about to New Year's Eve, and Sue has pretty much taken over Elizabeth's life at this point. And basically, she runs out of spinal fluid, and she goes back to get more out of Demi Moore's spine, or Elizabeth's spine, and there's none left. So she urgently calls the substance, hotline and asks, like, what do I do? And the boss or whoever basically tells her, like, you have to switch on every 7 days for the spinal fluid to rejuvenate. So she's tapped out. She doesn't have any more spinal fluid to use. Sue is out of spinal fluid, and it's about to be New Year's Eve. It's the day before, and she goes into a panic. And by doing so, she hurries up and switches out, and then we get that full-blown effect of what Elizabeth looks like coming out of the bathroom in the dark, and all you hear is this howling scream in the background, and then you see her. And I thought for myself, I thought like maybe this is going to be like kind of like a old lady kind of like look, but it was way, way, way more than that. It was like elder witch in the Elden Ring Witcher kind of hag look, and I was like, wow, that's fucking great. Now Elizabeth is brought back to life after 3 months. She is completely disintegrated almost at this point, to the point of an evil hag look, and she calls the hotline, tries to get some information on if she can get everything reversed, and he tells her no. There's nothing you can do about it. You should have been following the process. You two coexist. It's on you. He says, would you like to terminate the process and end from here? And she says yes. And the next day she gets this black substance in a needle and basically wants to end Sue's existence. And she tries. You know, she does. She goes to do it, and then at the final second, she's like, I can't do it. I need you. You're part of me. You exist with me. You're the reason why I am who I am now, right? So basically, she stops the termination, and she tries to bring her back to life. And by doing so, as she brings her back to life, the two miraculously come back to life at the same time. So they're both alive, full-blown effect. They're mimicking each other's movements. They're both moving around at the same time. They're both psychologically inbound. Everything is boom, right there in that moment, which I thought was really cool because I wasn't expecting it. I thought for sure that Sue was just going to die, and that's not what happened. She basically got an EpiPen of adrenaline, came back to life, and then realized that like Elizabeth was trying to kill her. So in order to kind of reconcile things, there ends in this giant fight between Elizabeth and Sue. And obviously Sue's going to get the upper hand, but the way that she did so is she beats the ever-loving shit out of Elizabeth. Drags her all over the apartment, chases her down, tackles her, kicks her. But the one that got me the most was whenever she chased her into the bathroom, tackled her, pushed her head into the mirror, and then just forcefully started slamming her head against the mirror until like her whole face looked like a piece of pie. And this is what I thought was going to be the like controversial part of this movie. I was wrong, because it goes even further from that point on to greater lengths than I even thought possible. Now we get to experience just Sue. Only Sue. She knows that she has to get ready for New Year's Eve, so she gets everything ready in preparation for New Year's Eve, and she goes to the New Year's Eve party. And as she gets there, things start to happen to her because she no longer has that life link to Elizabeth's character. And because she no longer has that life link, she starts to also disintegrate, right? But not in ways of like turning into an old hag. Basically, her teeth start to fall out, like one by one, and then she starts to pull them out one by one. And it was pretty cringy. So just take that for what it is. If you're not a fan of that, I wasn't a fan of it. It made me cringe, and I'm into some really dark horror stuff, okay? And it made me go, ugh, you know? So think about that before you go into this, because toward the end of this movie, the last like 30 minutes of this movie, you're going to be like, what in the actual fuck is going on right now? Her teeth start to fall out. She pulls them out. Then her fingernails start to come off, and you get to see every bit of her fingernail getting ripped off. So in order for her, basically Sue thinks that in order for her to reverse this, she still has some of the activator at home that brought her to life. Okay, so she goes back home, and the timeline for this is kind of all over the place because she was at New Year's Eve party, she went back to the hotel, and then back to New Year's Eve party. But the time span there for me didn't really add up, but whatever. So she goes back to the hotel, shoots herself up with the activator, right? Thinking that she's going to birth a better version of herself. And instead, she births the most grotesque monster effect I have ever seen in a movie since probably The Fly or John Carpenter's The Thing from the 80s. This is the part in the movie that I believe everyone was talking about now. So, spoiler effect, I think that's the giant controversial scene. I might be wrong, but this whole movie has a lot of nuances to controversy and nuances to body shame and body horror in Hollywood. So a lot of it is controversial. It's not as controversial for me as what people are making out to be, but that's just because, like, I've seen some shit. So basically she mutates into this Hills Have Eyes looking mutation from hell, and she essentially tries to go back to the New Year's Eve party because now she feels completely beautiful as herself, and she feels like she has obtained her own skin, and she just wants to be accepted by the rest of her peers in Hollywood. So she goes back, she puts her dress on, and she puts this cutout face of Elizabeth on, and she goes back to the New Year's Eve party. At the New Year's Eve party, we get a very Carrie-esque kind of visualization as she goes up on stage, and everyone's like, what in the fuck? Who are you? That's not Sue. What is that thing? You know? And essentially, she starts to decay, explode, whatever. And her arm comes off, and she births a boob out of her mouth. That happens. That's the thing in this movie. She births a boob out of her mouth, and it falls to the floor, and it explodes, and her arm comes off and explodes, and she starts sprinkling blood like a sprinkler all over everybody in the Hollywood New Year's Eve audience. And it's a very Carrie-esque scene, and it goes on for about 4 to 5 minutes straight. There's this beautiful musical going on behind it. There's blood splatter everywhere, tons of gore, and you know, everyone's in hysteria, wondering what the hell is going on. It's a really awesome scene. It really pays homage to those older, like 80s-esque movies. Now, we get to the point in this movie where we're starting to trail off in the last few minutes because Sue's now monstrum body now starts to decay, starts exploding. She's trying to get back to her hotel. And as she's going back to her hotel, basically, oh, I forgot to mention also, Elizabeth is part of this monster. She's on her back. Just her face. It's just her face, and she's making this, like, noise the whole entire time. Like, for 5 minutes straight, that's the only noise you hear from Elizabeth. Her mouth is open, there's this giant face on her back, and it's just making this, like, I'm out of breath gargling noise for, like, 4 fucking minutes. The monster's going back to the hotel. As she's walking back to the hotel, her body starts to form off, right? Starts to explode, decay, and we're left with just Elizabeth's face walking back to where this movie started. And it's crawling back, walking back, whatever have you. It's crawling back to the spot where this movie started out at. And the movie started out on Elizabeth's Walk of Fame star in Hollywood for being, you know, a quintessential star. And basically she dies and evaporates into the star, and we just get to see from that point on people walking on the star, forgetting about her as years and years and years and years go by. And I think that's where this movie's directive goes. It doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter all the fame and fortune that Hollywood can provide you, all the control in which these people have in Hollywood. At the end, everybody dies. And it's unfortunate. But everybody dies, and essentially, you're mostly forgotten about. I loved this movie. I would give it a solid 7.5, 8 out of 10, I would definitely go watch it. Go buy it. It's worth a watch. I definitely loved everything about this. I love the practical effects. I love the acting. I love the cinematography. I love the score. I love the monster that was made in this. I loved all the plot points and the different narratives that point toward Hollywood and the directive of which they control the world. I think it's a really well-rounded movie. For me, I would definitely maybe watch it 1 or 2 more times in my lifespan. I'm not going to watch it repeatedly over and over again. It's not one of those movies for me. Maybe it is for you. But for me, it's probably not one of those movies. I would probably watch it a couple times and I'd be like, okay, that's fine. But it is a very well-rounded and very good movie for everyone to check out. Alright folks, so that's the end of the video for me. I appreciate everything you guys do. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. If you like this video, go ahead and check out the other videos I have on the channel, a lot of different shorts as well. I appreciate it so much, more than you guys will ever know. Remember to check under your beds, like, share, and subscribe. Stay safe out there, everybody.